Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is EV Comics. Welcome to another indie comic review. Now, today is a very special day because we are finishing off the Isom series. What started it all, Isom 1, which I thought was a fairly good comic. Nothing too crazy, nothing too spectacular, but it was interesting. It had me interested, right? And then we get to Isom 2 a year later. Not as good as the first one. I felt like it was just as scatterbrained, even more scatterbrained, than the first one. Had a lot of stuff going on with it. And then finally we have the third one, and this one is thicker than. Oh, sorry, I just bumped the mic. Thicker than the other two, which made it more expensive than some other comics that have come out at a time. I think this thing. Where's the price at it? Where's the price? I'm looking for the price on the website. Oh, yeah, I guess I gotta click cover A. Yeah, okay, here we go. So $35 minimum, which is, again, expensive. And that was the main thing about like, you know, this comic was $35. I think this comic was $35. And then after they, you know, the Rippaverse started getting the name for itself a little bit, they were able to get better deals, better processes for getting stuff out, timely, but also at like a lower cost. So the prices of the comic went down, which is pretty nice. But this one is still expensive because of the sheer girth of the thing. I mean, I think it's like 140 pages, something like that. It's quite a bit. And most of my comics are anywhere from the 50s to the 60s in page count. So this is more than double from stuff I do, and I can just tell you from having to order comics, physical print comics, and selling them locally myself, I can understand why it would be more expensive. But anyway, I want to do a brief recap of Isom 1 and 2 and my thoughts on that, and then I'll get into Isom 3. So Isom 1, I thought was a pretty decent start to the Rippaverse because it had a character that was fairly relatable. It was someone that I thought, he was definitely a flawed character. And right away, from that first comic, he's checking in on this girl, Jasmine. He's trying to see, if she's been coerced into this gang against her will and stuff like that. And I like the premise of it. And especially whenever it showed his flaw of pride. And that's the same thing. That's something that I picked up on, was that his flaw and Darren Fontano, the main antagonist, both of them had the same flaw, which is pride and ego. And for me, I thought that was a pretty good start for a story. Having the villain and the protagonist both be very similar people. And I thought that was interesting to start off with for a comic. However, my negatives about this was that it was very scatterbrained at times. Because in this comic, the art has improved. This is the first time I've opened this comic in a while, and just after reading Isom 3, looking at this, the art has definitely improved. And I didn't even have much complaint about the art in the first book, but yeah, you can definitely tell. So there's a scene here, the iconic scene, of course. Isom is fighting Yaira because he just gets kicked out of the club, and basically there's this whole thing going on here where she just happens to be in the area, and then of course the Rippaverse canon event dropping him from the sky onto this car. This is the canon event of the Rippaverse because they showed this in multiple comics and multiple things. I forgot they had an ad right here. I forgot all about the ad right here. That is kind of crazy. I forgot there was an ad right there. Anyway, the main thing about this, the main complaint was that it was scatterbrained. Because it had that random moment with Yaira and the Alpha Core, I thought that was a little random. I didn't feel like that had much to do with anything. And the main purpose of it being there was to advertise other characters to make more comic series. And financially, at least for the start, it paid off because they've been consistently making pretty decent money on it. Yes, they're not making millions every comic release like they were when they started, but that was never going to be sustainable. You're kidding yourself if you're thinking that the Rippaverse is still not making good money, because they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars every single comic still. So it's, to me, you can't, like, I don't think anyone normal expected them to keep making millions of dollars per comic. That was never going to happen. But they're still successful. It's still a successful comic business right now, but they've definitely had some drama and stuff from the start of this and everything, and it mainly has to do with Van Sciver, but I'm not going to get into that. Isom 2, the bigger problem with it was that it was even more scatterbrained, because just like the first comic that kind of served as a launch pad for different characters getting their own comic, in this one we got an appearance of, where is he at? Come on, where's he at? Gooding. We got Gooding with the infamous where's that? The infamous Gooding typo. Where's it at? There it is. Goody-ing with the infamous typo. But it basically, I rag on that quite a bit, but it's you got Gooding and you got Bloodruth in this comic, and the comic takes a weird twist, a weird turn rather, from being all about Fontano to being about these demon goat creatures. And reading that, I was disappointed, because I was expecting him to rematch this guy, because Chadron is the creature dude, whatever, that caused Isom to retire. And it shows a flashback in here to that scene where he fails to save a girl who gets crushed because this guy is just too tough, too strong, and Isom couldn't do it, couldn't fight him. And it was good for backstory for Isom, but it didn't have anything really to do with the rest of the comic, which was him fighting these demon creatures with Bloodruth and saving his friend Sam, who had been taken captive on his ranch. And so, like, Isom comes back to his ranch in 2 and finds these demon goat creatures and whatnot. And again, the same strategy as the first one. Basically, Eric July is like, I'm going to throw a bunch of characters at you, and I'm going to make a bunch of comics off of it. And every time he's done this, every single character that's been introduced in Isom has gotten their own comic, except for some of the side characters like Altona and Lincoln, the Projectus CEO. There's very few characters that get introduced in this that do not have their own comic. And there's a third one in Isom 3, Salient, which I think is probably going to end up getting his own comic, though I don't know why, because he seems kind of boring to me. I'll talk about that whenever I get more into Isom 3, talking about the story. But the main critique that I've had is that the story has been scatterbrained and not really focused on something like an arc should be. And to me, that's been the greatest sin of it. And I was considering somehow in Isom 3, the demon subplot and the Darren Fontano main plot somehow merged together. Somehow they're working together in some way. I doubted that would happen, but maybe there was some way that it could. Unfortunately, that does not happen. They are both entirely separate things. And look, don't get me wrong. I don't think it would make sense if they were working together at all. I don't think it would make sense logically. But for a storytelling purposes, it would make it feel like it actually is necessary to be there. It would justify itself. And as it is right now, these two storylines have nothing to do with each other, which has been my main two gripes. It's the scatterbrainness and the stories not having anything to do with each other. So Isom 3 comes out, and it has been like, I think 2 years since Isom 2 came out. Long awaited for me, because I wanted to see what happens with the Fontano side of the story. And I am here to say that it is actually a satisfying ending, which is not what I was really expecting. I was hoping that it would happen, but I kind of didn't think it would. And I was pleasantly surprised reading this. I read it on stream yesterday, and I kind of live picked out everything. And I wanted, like, you know, to interact with viewers to get an idea for it. And I was very surprised at how satisfying this actually was. This was actually a good ending to the Fontano arc. Now, I think Eric kind of figured out that the demon subplot was random, that it didn't really fit in with the main story, and he kind of sidelined it quite a bit. Yes, Sam, Isom's friend, does get some screen time, or I'll call it screen time, with Gooding and Bloodruth talking about the markings on his back. They're not sure what it is, but they're going to keep an eye out on it. Apparently the demons aren't even supposed to be here. It's some kind of weird anomaly that they're here in the first place. And looking at it from that arc, I think Eric made the right decision of putting that on the sideline and not really focusing on it much at all. Like, they really only talk about it at the beginning and in the end. And there's like a little scene with Sam and Gooding in the middle somewhere, towards the end in the middle. There's that little scene with those two. Yeah, it's right in the middle, actually. It's like almost perfectly in the middle. But I think doing that was smart for, you made a mistake. You got to acknowledge the storyline. You can't just drop it entirely. So I think recovering from that mistake, I think Eric did pretty decent with it. Again, it's his mistake in the first place, but I think he did a good job of trying kind of making it work as best as he could in this. Again, I'm still complaining about it. It's still a nitpick for me. But I want to go ahead and get the nitpicks out of the way so I can talk about the actual story of this, because I actually think the story of it is pretty solid. It's actually the most focused story Eric has written. Now I haven't read Salvage in the Rippaverse, but I have no idea. Maybe that's a more focused story. Maybe that's good. I don't know. I haven't read it, but to me, this is the only one I've read where I'm like, yes, this is actually a pretty well-focused story that has like a consistent plot throughout it, and basically it focuses on the central theme of pride. It focuses on the central theme of these two characters, the Isom and Fontano, and at some point, Isom's kind of beat up after fighting the demons. And he gets taken, Bloodruth sends a wolf to go save him. The wolf is like super powered or whatever, like some kind of mystical thing. And he goes to his parents' house after Fontano sends his goons after, Isom's parents. And it turns out that his mom has the same power that he does. Apparently it's called Peeker. I don't know what Peeker means in context of like what the power is, but it seems to me like my theory this entire time has been that Isom is a copycat. Like, the more he touches people, the more he copies their powers. He doesn't take it from them, but he can stack it, right? If he touches like all the demons thing that were dogpiling him in Isom 2, there's a scene where once that's happening, he kind of burst off of them with like a huge burst of power. And let me see, it's right here. Yeah. So like they're dogpiling him, right? There's a guy who's like really grabbing onto him and like holding him, but then Isom kind of burst with the same sort of explosion effect that the demons do. And to me, that tells me that he's a copycat. And that's what I've been saying since Isom 2. Isom 1 didn't really give you a reason to think that he was anything other than just mild super strength and durability. Isom 2 made you think. And what I love about it, and this is what I've defended about Isom this entire time, compared to all the other comics, Isom had me more intrigued than any of the others. And the reason why is because the subtlety in the writing. Up until this point, there's been no explanation for Isom's powers. And some people would look at that as a critique. I've looked at it as a fun way to keep me invested and to keep me thinking about the story. Because unlike Alpha Core, Yaira, Gooding, and Horseman, I haven't had anything really to theory craft about those as much as I have with Isom's power. And a lot of people have had the same thoughts as me. I didn't come up with the theory. I saw someone point it out, and I was like, yes, this makes sense. And then I connected another dot. Another thing about subtlety in Isom 2 is Lincoln, the Projectus CEO, walks through a metal detector, which, yes, was a elevator 3D asset that they forgot to remove the elevator button for. But he walks through the metal detector and sets it off. And the guy's like, you don't need to have a gun, sir. And he's like, gun? Like he thinks, he's like, what do you mean gun? I'm not carrying a gun. And so that gives you an idea that whenever he crashes his car on purpose and sends himself flying through the windshield, it gives you the idea that this guy might be a cyborg, right? He might have some metal in him. And there is a scene pretty early on wherever Isom is talking to Lincoln. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Yeah. So Lincoln's here, and you can see on this page he's kind of scratched up. Like he's got scratches on him, and you know, you can see some marks from where he crashed through it, but he's not bleeding. They're not red marks. They're just black marks. And that to me, again, still no concrete explanation for it, but to me, that gives me, the reader, the hint that this guy's a cyborg. And I like that. I like a story that doesn't hold your hand, that actually lets you put the pieces together and think about it. I like that. And a lot of people complain, like, hey, what's his powers? Like, how am I supposed to follow the story if I don't know his powers? I don't think you need to know it. I think you can understand it enough up until this point that he has that his abilities are part of the mystery. His power is part of the story. It's a totally intentional thing to keep readers thinking. And this one kind of explains it a little bit. His mom's got the same powers. Apparently, the powers descend from their ancestor who was healed in Galilee, the biblical Galilee. Which is interesting because for the longest time, people have pointed out that this guy's got a crotch belt thing that has a cross on it. And people pointed that out and said, like, okay, Isom, this guy is a Christian superhero. And there was this whole drama with the International School of Ministry that was really just unfounded. And the lawsuit was dropped or whatever. They settled it out of court or whatever. And so in what I've noticed is in this comic, the cross kind of just looks like a plus. Like there's several pages where Isom's fighting in the suit, and it doesn't at all look like a cross anymore. Like here, that's a plus. Like you can't really see it very well, but that is a plus. And never at any point in this comic does it look like a cross. So I feel like maybe they said, okay, we're going to take out the cross from his design to make it more obvious that this guy's not like a Christian superhero or whatever. But then in Isom 3, he's quoting like some scripture and talking about how his ancestor from Galilee got healed. And that's why ever since then, one person in a generation gets the Peaker ability. And like, fine, that's a fine backstory, but it is really funny. How after like going up and down, like saying like Isom has nothing to do with the International School of Ministry. Well, he might not have anything to do with the Institute, but he does have something to do with the Theology. And I thought that was interesting. But, some people are going to say some drama about that. I don't think there's any place to stand on that lawsuit. I don't think there was anything at all to sue over. It was just some trolling going on. And I think the international school kind of fell for the troll. But either way, the backstory is welcomed. I like that. They still don't explain everything, but they do kind of, like Eric does, release some context for what this ability is. And it seems like it's part of it is dependent on where Isom's motivations are. And his motivation up until this point, like after the fight, he's really weak. He says like he can't regain his strength. He's not doing well at all. And the reason why is because he's not fighting for the right reason. And that would be pride. He's fighting because his pride was wounded whenever he got beaten by Sanchuan in the first comic. And even after beating Sanchuan, he still feels like his pride is down because Fontano is disrespecting his family. Like he goes after Altona in Isom 2. And now in Isom 3, he's going after his parents. So it's like the whole time it's a pride thing. When he should be looking at it like he's doing this to stop a criminal. He's doing this for the right reason, to protect people. And now he does that. In Isom 3, there is a character arc that after having this conversation with his mom, it kind of resets his mindset where he's like, I'm doing this for the wrong reason. This isn't about me. This isn't about ego. This is about now. It's about protecting my family from this mob boss type of guy. And that to me is a good character arc. And that's something that a lot of Rippaverse characters haven't had much of, is a character arc. And, Horseman Horseman, it seems, by the end of his comic, kind of comes around to the idea that he shouldn't be doing this. He shouldn't be Horseman, because it's endangering his sister and nephew. And I kind of like that arc, but now there's more Horsemen, so is that undone? I don't know. I haven't read it yet. I don't think it's come out yet, but it's just one of those things where it's just there's not many arcs for the characters of the Rippaverse so far. And this is a solid arc. This is actually like a really solid, satisfying arc for both Isom and Fontano, starting off with the same place of pride and ego, and one of them has to grow out of it. One of them has to forget that and move on. And of course, it has to be the protagonist. So, very good, very good actual arc here that I think is it's enjoyable. It's satisfying to me. At the end of the day, like I was more satisfied with the ending of this comic than I was than a lot of other Rippaverse comics. I'm not going to say all of them, but because I think Alpha Core had a really good story to it. But I feel like for Isom's character, this is a good place for him to end his first arc, the ill-advised arc. I think it's a great start for his character, looking forward to the future, right? Plot twist. Let's talk about plot twist, right? Turns out Jasmine this whole time has not been captive. She's not been coerced. She is just she is someone who works for Fontano, and she's got this force field. And for me, I thought it stopped things. Like I thought it was just like a generic energy force field, but instead it's a time force field. So any inanimate object that enters this immediately stops. Like the time of it stops, and the bullets that get fired at the force field just stop. Isom grabs one and crushes it in his hand, showing that he's gotten over his pride and ego. He's regaining his strength back. And great visual way of showing that, by the way. Like visual storytelling, it's subtle stuff, and I like that. And then you've got the fact that people can just like reach into the force field and grab you out. It's clear that Jasmine's powers cannot stop living beings in time, but it can stop inanimate objects, and I like that. Now, there's the other plot point is that the reason why she's even doing this, the reason why she's working for Fontano, is because Fontano has this crystal thing, and no, it's not deep foliated calcite. That's an Andor reference, but it's like this green crystal thing. Let me pull it up. Let me find it. Here we go. So yeah, so this green rock, this crystal thingamahoosin here is what Fontano is looking for, and where's the other page where he's talking about it? Somewhere around here. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, it's pure uncured Mitrox. Incredible. So this is some kind of very powerful gemstone that has a lot of value to it for whatever reason. Clearly it has some kind of function. And that's kind of his plan here. He goes to this oil refinery that he's going to buy. His plan is to buy it. And then Isom shows up and kind of ruins that. And then they end up, there's this lizard guy named Rippaverse, excuse me. Who is hired by Fontano to steal this gemstone, and ends up showing up at the refinery, punches Isom into one of the oil containers, and then the goons shoot it. And the country of Texas economy is in shambles because that's the second oil refinery that's been blown up. Yaira did it and simultaneously said, "Don't F with Texas." Guess what, sister? You just effed with the entire Texas economy, and now even more so, it's in ruins in this. It's completely in ruins. Anyway, they gotta acknowledge that. It has to be acknowledged in the story. You can't just blow up 2 oil refineries in a country and not acknowledge the fact that this is a problem. Like, I want this to be addressed in a future Rippaverse thing. It has to be addressed. They can't just ignore it. That's too huge of a thing to ignore. But anyways, continuing, somehow Isom survives that explosion, and I'm really not sure how he does. He's not even he's not burned or anything. Like he's perfectly fine. And that to me, I'm like, what's the deal here? What's the issue? And it's possible that Rippaverse whenever he's punching them and like getting punched back. It's possible that Lepredo has some fire resistance because he gets put in the flames and is himself on fire for a little bit, but it doesn't seem to bother him. It's possible that he copied Repredo's powers and flame resistance and managed to survive that. That's the only way that I can really get it. Otherwise, I'm confused about how Isom survived an explosion of oil that he was like right next to. That's the only way I can. That's the only way I can make it make sense. And that's an area where I feel like it could have used some explanation, because otherwise I'm just grasping at a single straw. But another critique I have is is that the box with the gem, the green crystal, is never shown until it's brought to Fonteno. And that to me is like, why would you not show this before? And you might be asking, well, shouldn't they have included Repredo and this Max Salient guy? Shouldn't they have shown them in a previous scene as like a setup for stealing the gemstone? Shouldn't they have done that? Well, the answer is they did. And it shows him fighting at like a prison ward. He's fighting a bunch of guards and stuff. And then at some point during the fight, this new character, Max Salient, shows up. And he seems to just be another generic, super strong, super fast, super durability guy. Just very generic. And if he has other powers, he hasn't shown them yet. And it's just, to me, I think he's just kind of boring. He doesn't really intrigue me at all. And this is where the scatterbrain stuff still happens, because we go on this random little vacation here from the main plot to this point. But again, at no point is this box with the crystal shown in this scene at all. They have some kind of a backstory, how both Salient and Repredo were both prisoners at this ward. And Salient used it to turn his life around. Repredo used it to, just continue to descend further into crime. And, I like the little backstory given for these characters. I would rather have it than not have anything, because it does tell you a little bit about who these characters are. But the issue I have with the scene is that there's at no point the crystal is not shown at all until it appears at the exploded refinery in Fonteno's hands. And to me, I feel like that should have been set up. That should have been shown, like, instead of fighting at the ward, how about you just show Repredo stealing the gemstone from somewhere else, from like another location, and then Max Salient shows up to stop him, right? Should have done that. And it's just, right now, all it is, it's implied that happens. I never see it. I'm told, but I'm not shown. And show don't tell is a good rule to follow for a reason, because it left me confused in this moment where this crystal came from when I was reading it. And something else that left me confused, equally confused about this, and this is the biggest, I think, art error that I've seen, and it's not so much of an error as much of a failure of consistency in itself, is this guy right here on the right page. I'm going to try and show this as close as I can. This guy right here is supposed to be Fonteno. This looks like a white guy with a beard, with a brown beard. It does not at all look like a black guy with a black beard. I don't know how this managed to happen. But when this page came up and I saw this man who doesn't look like Fonteno holding this crystal, I had no idea who he was. I was legitimately confused at who this guy was and where this crystal came from. And I paused for like 5 minutes. I paused reading the story for 5 minutes to try and go back and maybe see if maybe I missed who this character was. And eventually I realized that he's wearing the same cowboy hat as him, and smoking the cigar, the same cigar that he is, right? He's holding the same cigar. So when this happened, I was completely taken out of the story. Then my immersion was completely broken, and I was like, wow, what is going on here? Who is this guy? And I understand that the lighting of the fire can make him look brighter, can make him look, less dark. But the face doesn't even look like a black guy's face. Like, especially not Fonteno's face. This is Fonteno's face. This right here is Fontano. The guy I showed you on that page does not at all look like Darren Fontano. And to me, that's a more egregious art failure than drawing a hand wrong or something. That to me, unless it's the Horseman example, because that's atrocious. But to me, that was like a huge failure for like the art team. And I'm not just talking about Cliff Richards and Sebastian Chang. I'm talking about every single editor that's credited. Allow me to read them. The editors here: Carol Brown, assistant editor-in-chief; Andrew Rodriguez, the lead editor; the Soska sisters, editors; Kanan White, lead art editor; Igor Texiera, another art editor. All these people, including Eric July and Cliff Richards and Sebastian Chang, all saw that page and thought, nothing's wrong with this. And I don't understand how this consistently happens with the Rippaverse books. There's some just egregiously obvious art problems that slip by 7 people. 7 people, somehow it slips by them. And I don't understand how it's possible. I like me as someone who is just doing this art and showing it to like 3 friends and saying, does anything look weird here? They will point it out to me. And yes, maybe there's some stuff that slips through the cracks that I haven't noticed and maybe my friends haven't noticed. But not the key point is that none of us are professionals. None of us are getting paid to do any of this. Well, I guess I'm getting paid by selling the physical copies, but my friends are not getting paid to do this. And I feel like they're doing a better job than these 7 people that I just mentioned. How is that possible? How is it possible for stuff like this to get by? And look, for the most part, the art in this book is fantastic. I love the art style. I love the impact of some of the hits. There's some really good artistic stuff that I pointed out in the stream yesterday. But honestly, it is mind-blowing to me how some of these huge mistakes continue to get by. And there's got to be something done better. And the only way that I can see it happening at this point, with how many times it's happened across multiple comics, the only way, especially with the page printing error that the Rippaverse just announced that they're doing refunds for, to me, the only way that this changes, you got to fire some people. I don't know if it's Kanan White, I don't know if it's Igor or whoever, but someone's got to get fired. That's the only way I can look at this and say, like, the only way that this can realistically improve is if someone gets fired for this, because this is just bad. This is just bad. And I'm not doing this out of like hatred for these guys. I'm not doing it out of like just disgust or anything. I'm doing this because I think the Rippaverse could genuinely make some of the greatest comics out there if they locked in, if they just focused on fixing the little cracks in the armor that allow stuff like this to slip through. If they do that, thank you, J. Lou, for liking my thing. If that is fixed, I think the Rippaverse could genuinely be a great comic book company. But as it is, there's a lot of issues that need to be ironed out. And this is like year 3, year 4 of this now. It has to be fixed. At some point, it has to be fixed. And that's coming out of a place of constructive criticism. This is coming from a guy. I'm not a hater. I'm not a troll. I'm not a detractor. A lot of people sometimes think I am. A lot of people think I'm a Rippaverse shill. I get both of these responses from people on Twitter and YouTube comments because I'm neither. I am someone who is genuinely just trying to look at this from a mostly objective viewpoint, but also someone who, like, instead of like rooting for them to fail, I'm rooting for them to get better. I want them to get better. I'm not dancing on the grave of Isom or Rippaverse or anything. I want to see this improve because I believe in the concept of what they're doing here. I love that there's an independent comic, not just for the Rippaverse stuff, but a publishing studio like Rippaverse that helps other comic artists and creators just get their stuff out. I love it. And I want it to succeed. But there has to be some quality control fixing. There has to be some, like, just huge sweeping changes that need to be made to get this where it needs to be, because it isn't, and it still hasn't, and it hasn't been for quite some time. But besides that, what I've said about this comic, do I recommend the Isom series, not just Isom 3, because I can't just recommend Isom 3. I had to recommend the whole series. Do I recommend this series? And it's what I would give it as a whole. I would probably rank it somewhere at like a 6 out of 10. Now that sounds bad, but I mean what I mean by a 6 out of 10 is that the books are so scattered, so scatterbrained, so unfocused on the main plot that it can be very distracting, and I think it's been a learning experience for the Rippaverse because other comics after this have been a lot more focused on what their main plot is of the book. And yes, some stuff comes around, like, there was a random scene in Isom 2 with Sanchuan that didn't really go anywhere in that book, but it did go somewhere in this book. So, there's some things that come around. The Projectus CEO, who felt a little random at times in Isom 2, plays a big part in Isom 3. So there's some things that were fixed. There's some randomness that were fixed from comic 2 to comic 3. But that's just been my main critique. Do I love the art? I do like the art. I think the art overall is pretty good, with some issues that slip through. But the art overall is fairly consistent, fairly good looking. And the character of Isom, I've thought, has been interesting this whole time. He's been the one that I've been most interested in. And dare I say, he's the most human and relatable out of all of them. He's got a major flaw that we can all relate to, which is pride and ego getting in the way of us making a good decision. I know I've let it happen to me several times. And it takes someone else sometimes pointing it out to me. Sometimes I can take a step back and realize it myself, but there's sometimes where I just need someone to come in and say, hey, this isn't a good idea. You might think it is, but if you take a step back and look at it, you'll realize that this is not a good idea. And sometimes I listen. and I think for a relatable character, I feel like this Isom guy is the most relatable character out of all the Rippaverse. I think he's the most heroic out of all of them as well. Alpha Core, I think they're pretty heroic as well, but Yaira is definitely not a hero at all. Horseman is borderline anti-hero, I suppose. Gooding is probably the most heroic, but I kind of think it makes his character worse because I was under the assumption that he was a guy who did protective stuff for hire from Isom 2, how he was introduced, and then the Gooding comic made him just a Peter Parker type of help anyone no matter what type of character. And I felt like that actually made him less unique, less interesting than he was for a hero for hire. Kind of like Booster Gold, I guess, from the comics, similar to him a little bit from the DC Comics universe. But yeah, like, do I recommend Isom? If you want to get started in the Rippaverse, I recommend Isom 1, 2, and 3. Because it's important to, like, understand all the characters that get introduced in this. And like I said, the idea of making Isom a launch pad for other characters is, like, clearly successful. It has clearly worked for several different series that have spawned from Isom. But I think it's good for the business in the short term, but it's bad for Isom as a story, as a character in the long run. I think it's negatively hindered the Isom story, introducing all these characters like this. But at the same time, I think it's really good. And there's something I forgot to mention. At the end of Isom 3, there is a moment where Isom visits the parents of the girl he failed to save. And that, to me, was the most profound moment in all the Rippaverse stuff I've read. Because that is not only him killing his ego, dying to his ego. That is not only, or his ego dying for him to do this. He is actively facing the past and rectifying it. Because his parents, because the parents of the girl are, like, furious that not only did he not save her, they feel like he could have done it, but he didn't even show up to her funeral. And that is something that has haunted him clearly, and to the point where after he's gone through this character arc of letting his ego die and coming back to being Isom, to be a hero, to actually, like, be a selfless person like he initially set out to be, for him to do that, to go back and say, I'm sorry, I want to make this right. is a great moment. Like it genuinely, I was like, this is the best ending for Isom in this arc. Like I genuinely thought it was a really well made arc in this final book of this arc anyway. And again, I was satisfied with it. I was very satisfied with the ending. I've made some critiques. I've made some points about it. But to summarize, I thought the art overall was pretty good. The story was pretty good and much more focused this time than the previous two. Isom as a character has a great character arc that I really enjoyed. And I want to see more. I want to see where Isom goes next. If it's not in his own series, maybe he appears in some other Rippaverse series, and you get to see his character change more. I'm excited to see what they do, what more they do with this character. I genuinely think this is a fun experience. It's far from perfect, but it is a very fun experience, especially this last one. That I think shows that Eric, as a writer, is improving. He is improving. He is acknowledging the scatterbrainness of the first two comics, whether he says it or not. He has definitely acknowledged the flaws in the first two and has addressed it with the third one. And of course, the cliffhanger at the end is, the marks on Sam's back glow every now and then. The demons aren't supposed to be here, but they are for some reason. So that's a cliffhanger. And Jasmine is still out there and still using her powers, and Fontano might have burned a bridge with her by being willing to sacrifice her to kill Isom because he's so prideful he can't let it go. Even though Jasmine is important to his plan, he still can't let go of his ego and is willing to ruin his own plan, to sabotage his own plan just to kill Isom because he hates him. And that to me is like, Isom goes to ego death. Fontano dies to ego, and he doesn't actually die, but I think it's a very good story arc. I think it's a very good character arc for these two. So yeah, with all that being said, I talked for over 40 minutes. I feel like I had to use 40 minutes to say everything I wanted to say about this. Because I was genuinely surprised at how much better this one was than the previous two. So, if you want to watch more reviews, subscribe to my channel, leave a like on this video. Tell me what you thought, tell me if you disagree or agree. As long as you're cordial, as long as you're not being annoying, I will genuinely look at your opinion, and maybe you can change my mind on a few things, but I just want to see what you guys think in the comments. And check out my own comic stuff. You can check out my own materials for free. It's on Global Comics. Thank you guys so much for 5,000 total views on the thing. And that's not even counting the people who have bought it in real life. I've been selling physical copies at local events in my neighborhood, and it's been such a fun time just seeing just the kids. Seeing the kids be so excited about it, wanting to see what comes next, wanting to get the next comic after their parents buy the first one for them, and even the kids that were I draw my own characters too, I do this stuff too, and I'm like, yeah, and maybe someday you'll have a table with your own comic selling it. That just tells me this is what I'm doing this for, right? I'm doing this. I'm telling stories to inspire other kids to keep doing their own artwork, and that's what I set out to do is to tell stories, to make kids excited about storytelling and art and stuff the same way that 2000s cartoons and comic books inspired me. So I mean it's heartwarming, man. And I can't wait to do more. More Little Miss Steel is on the way, but you can check out volumes 1 through 3 right now for free. And I would really appreciate good reviews, sharing it. All the numbers have been organic. I haven't done a lot of advertising at all. So it's just, it's great to see. But thanks so much for watching. Until next time, peace out.